So, hi everyone. I'm Talia. I'm an angel investor and a startup advisor, and this is the Tech Finance Network's M&A series. The Tech Finance Network is a collaborative community of investors, finance professionals, and founders that work closely with the Greek startup ecosystem. You can find our group on LinkedIn, and you can follow us to keep up with our news and future meetups. So today we're starting this M&A series. This is the first episode from the founder's take, and then we're going to go on to show M&A advisors' take and also the point of view of corporate development professionals, so the other side of the table. We all know that naturally, with technological innovation comes value creation, and this usually means exit. And exit comes in the form of an acquisition more often than not. So today we'll start exploring the paths to this exit. Questions like, how early should you actually engage with your potential buyers? And do you even know that they're your potential buyers at that time? Or what does your first interaction with them look like? And how do you actually start building value towards an exit? And when do you have to start doing that? So in this first episode, we'll be approaching these questions from the founder's side. And with me today is a person that I've had the chance to work with side by side for the past 6 years. It's George Varvarelis, the CEO and co-founder of Augmenta. Augmenta, which automates chemical spraying in agriculture, was a pre-seed investment of Marathon VC, and it was acquired exactly 1 year ago by CNH Industrial for more than 100 million. So, hi, George.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, where are you right now?
Oh, that's a cool story. So, we want to show you maybe. I'm in
Sure,
Arizona,
yeah.
like in the middle of the desert here in Arizona, and we're doing some farm testing. I'll mute myself for just a second to show you.
Wow. Wow. Okay, this looks like a poster, George. You guys always had the best locations and the best footage to share. I am
Yeah.
humbled in my Athens house.
And the setup is pretty robust as well. I'm in a trailer, like with a Starlink connection, so that's also pretty cool. Yeah,
Which is actually probably a better connection than the center of Athens. But anyways,
most probably. Yep. Yep.
okay. So would you like to briefly introduce yourself and Augmenta?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an electrical engineer. I was focusing on software after my graduation, and practically Augmenta was born back in 2017 as an academic project. So pretty much immediately after, myself and Jim, who by the way I see in the call as well, immediately after we graduated, we started Augmenta, and we had a pretty normal startup journey until the exit that happened in 2023. So pretty much six and like a little bit, a few months into the journey, and the journey concluded with an exit. Augmenta is doing what we call in this ag industry sense and act. So in agriculture, you have big tractors like the one hopefully you saw when I saw the outside of the trailer. So these are big machines that you drive in the farm to do operations. And those big machines not only drive, you can't just drive them, but you also do a bunch of operations with them, like spraying fertilizers or spraying herbicides to kill weeds or tilling your farm, which is shuffling practically the soil to make it like healthier for the crop to come. So these types of actions need optimization, and that's exactly what Augmenta is doing. So Augmenta has a hardware that is mounted on top of tractors. We scan the field, we detect the different nuisances that any field has around the world, like this area is healthier compared to this area over here, and then in real time we control these machines, like a rate of a sprayer or a rate of a spreader, to apply more or less of these chemicals, nutrients, water, whatever it may be, to both maximize the yield potential of the field, but at the same time save a lot of money for the farmer from chemicals, unnecessary chemicals and nutrients and other crop inputs. So that's pretty much what Augmenta is doing. My current role is after the acquisition, I'm leading the Sense and Act division of CNH Industrial. Um, that that is the second biggest tractor manufacturer in the world right now.
Okay, so basically you're feeding the world slash saving the world stuff, superhero stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, okay, let's get started. I guess Augmenta had one of the most archetypical startup journeys. The young and ambitious team, they're very hard tech. So you tick all the boxes. And I guess, it'd be great if we could have a short version of the story from you.
Yeah, I'll make it extremely short because I'm sure we're gonna dive deep in many of these, let's say, points in this journey. I think we had a pretty stereotypical journey, apart from the fact that we didn't have any logos as founders. Either me or Jim, we weren't like past Google or Apple, employees or anything like that, or Stanford or Harvard or MIT. So I guess we didn't have that coming for us, but certainly we were young founders, very technical. We were, I think, a big part, which will come up, I'm sure, in this discussion, is our connection with the industry and the end user. We, specifically Jim, but also myself, we come from Volos, a small city in the middle of Greece, which is next to the biggest agricultural area in Greece. So Jim is a professional farmer. I grew up in the farming ecosystem, so we were pretty close to the end user, and that's a big part of why we love this so much. So that's a huge piece of the story. And then in 2017, we raised our first pre-seed round from Marathon, and we had a product, which is pretty normal. And then we spent a couple of years developing the product. Then we raised a few more $1 million. Like we reached our Series A phase in general before exiting. And at the end, the last 3 years, practically, we had a hockey stick growth in both sales and general traction, let's say, in the company. And all that led to a pretty normal exit, normal in the sense of terms, and it wasn't like strange. That's pretty much the journey. Now we are in a post-integration, post-acquisition phase where we, both myself and Jim and the rest of the team, have pivotal roles in the broader org, and we are driving the Augmenta or Augmenta-like products home.
So it's been a year since the acquisition, and reflecting back on this experience now, 1 year later, what would you say were the key factors? What was your secret sauce to success?
Yeah, I mean, reflecting back, there are a million things that I can think about, but I would say, because I've thought about this a lot lately, I think there are predominantly 3 things that I can think of, or I can summarize a little bit the journey with. So one, which I think is a characteristic of both mine and Jim's, and actually the entire founding teams, is that we were always like, we were never stopping. Practically, we had perseverance. We were brute forcing ourselves a lot, especially in the earliest phases, the phases of the go-to-market strategy, the phases of finding the first customers, and even building the first version of the product. So I think that part is a big piece of our journey. I think the second piece, which is a little bit related to the first one, is our ignorance. And I'm thinking about this, especially now that I have a little bit of a more senior role in a big organization, like a bigger team, and terms like risk assessment and planning ahead, like very, very specifically with Excel sheets and all that stuff. This is part of my job now, and while I'm doing these things now, I'm just thinking, oh my God, if I did any of this in the first couple of years of Augmenta, we would never like do anything practically. We would never like drive to Serbia to sell to a single customer because it didn't make any sense. It wasn't scalable at all. It like things like that. I think it's a little bit weird because on from one side you think that these need to happen. These things need to happen, but on the other side, if we blocked ourselves by limiting ourselves, I don't think we would have reached that point. So ignorance is a bliss a little bit in kind of this second aspect, second highlight, let's say, of this journey. And I would say the third one, which is also very clear to me, is this constant evolution kind of notion that we went through and we're still going through, by the way. But it feels like every 3 months, practically from 2017, like every quarter, practically the first 10 people in the team were like leveling up massively. We were changing our skill set aggressively. We were changing our mindset, our even cultural beliefs. And that's a big part, I think, of our journey. And by the way, it's, it's a little bit of a plug to you personally and the rest of the, marathon team. Like especially early investors and the people that work closely with startups are very relevant to this evolution part, because most probably these people have been there, done that. Even if they haven't done that themselves, most probably they've done that through other founders or other success stories, and that kind of funneling of knowledge from other startups to first-time founders, I think that's a big piece of the evolution that a first-time founder especially needs to have to succeed. Yeah, I guess.
Okay, well, you mentioned a few things there. So unscalable. I smiled when you said that, because I always say that in the beginning, you need to do the unscalable before you can actually scale. You need to go for the unscalable. So you need to be like really close to your first customers, and you need to go the extra mile. You went that literally, and Jim went that even more literally, your co-founder. So it's exactly that what you should be doing in the beginning, like striving for your customers and for your customer success, I guess. So when did you start meeting larger customers and your potential future buyers? At which state was your product at that point?
Yeah, I can give you the example of the actual buyer in this case of CNH. So we met CNH in 2019 in a trade show in Tulare, California, where we went like we had almost no money at the time. Our pre-seed round was like $600,000, like 500K euros. So we practically had zero money. And I remember vividly that we went to that trade show and we were begging the organizers, like, we're just a startup. I mean, we're not selling anything really. We just want to showcase our. At that point, I would say it was a little bit more than an academic prototype. It was certainly not like a product ready to go in the field. Our first like commercial product was 2021, so it was like 2 years earlier than that. So not product ready for sure. Super early on in the process in a trade show, they just loved the concept. They knew that it's not ready, of course, but we established a super early relationship that we didn't capitalize until later, like 2 years later.
So yeah, the acquisition was actually last year, and you mentioned 2019 here. So it's not like one day you got an email, I guess, for the acquisition. Interesting. Okay. So you also mentioned the US and conferences in your response, and I've been wanting to ask that anyways. And I know that at one point you moved to the US, and I know that you were hitting up conferences all around, you and Jim as well, and other team members. So I want to ask you this, conferences and traveling obviously distracts a founder from product development, from the team back home. And with a founder coming out of Greece, what value do you think these things bring, the traveling and the conferences? Is it all worth it? And can you actually take advantage of it when you don't have a big budget, when you have a very limited budget, like you did when you started up?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I can think of two layers of answers here. One is the more practical one about conferences that I definitely will answer, and then the other one is a little bit more the high level, like traveling to broaden horizons, to go to the area that the the big players are, and kind of try to play with them a little bit and understand how they work and how they think. So I'll start with the second one because I think it's that's how we did it. So the very first thing that we did after the pre-seed round by Marathon in 2018, the very first thing, actually, if I remember correctly, like the same week that we closed the deal, I was off to Austin. I was off to Austin, Texas, and the reason why I did that is because I personally felt I, that I didn't know anything about this industry, even though we grew up next to the farm. But very quickly we realized that we wanna be a global player, not just a regional player, not even a European player. We wanna be a global disruptor, and I wanted to go, and I had to go to the biggest market, and that was the US. And I found an opportunity at the time. It was like incubator. They were giving us like free offices or something and some kind of training. Back in 2018, it was called Mass Challenge. So we went there. I went there by myself, and then practically I spent all my time, all my days there, like meeting customers, meeting fellow founders, trying to like untangle this web of like agriculture on a global scale. So I do believe that that's massively important, especially for first-time founders, especially for first-time founders that have been in Greece only and haven't broadened their horizons earlier for like jobs or other types of things. So that's the overarching kind of answer on this one. And then specifically about conferences, I think conferences are extremely important. I do believe that they are easy to kind of mess up because like everybody thinks that to go to a conference I need to spend, I don't know, 100 grand or 50 grand to go and have a perfect booth and hire a marketing agency to set it up and all that stuff. Most probably Jim will be laughing hearing about these things. So we like in the first trade shows we went there and we were not having any booths. We were just going there like $500 to just for our ticket to go in, and we were like walking the trade show, I don't know, 100 times, and we were giving away business cards. But I would say, and I'm wrapping up, I would say that the biggest thing with conferences, regardless of whether you spend a lot of money or no money at all, is being prepared. I think the biggest thing that I've found with any types of these events is that like preparation, like finding out who are the people that will be there and like targeting specific people in specific companies that you care about, mostly prioritizing them, putting them in tiers, and most importantly communicating beforehand and setting up meetings beforehand. That's, in my opinion, like most of the reason why we felt these conferences were successful.
And I know Jim has some very interesting stories with cheap Airbnbs, let's say. Let's put it like that too. But yeah, you can also find cheaper ways for accommodation, etc., and travel. Okay. Founders often also struggle to negotiate deal terms with their first adopters. And you were in a particularly, reluctant to adopt technology market. So it was even more for you guys. And you don't have that much leverage in the beginning. So I wonder, what are, the red flags, the very common terms in commercial contracts that one should be careful of, and that could adversely affect a future exit scenario?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. Also, two types of answers here. On one side, the easy answer is that when you are dealing with smaller types of customers, it's usually very easy to just do like normal commercial deals for a service. You know, they pay you something, you give some goods, no extra complications. But the tricky part comes when we start talking about bigger customers that usually in most of the industries are also potential acquirers, right? So these types of Fortune 500 type of companies are very, very tricky to negotiate with, especially in the early stages of a startup. I think like the elephant in the room here is any kind of like non-time based exclusivity rights are a big issue. So any type of exclusivity slash licensing that doesn't have a time cap, the time cap that is not like 30 years, time cap that is not like 2 or 3, very, very worst case scenario. I think it's a big problem. And actually, it's a great question because it's always a huge dilemma for the founders, right? Because it's your first huge customer, right? You wanna sell, you wanna bring in your first $1 million. Like, regardless of any kind of business thing that you might think about, you are urged to just take the deal. It's gonna give you 2 more years in runway. It's gonna most probably, you think it's gonna bring your next round of financing. So I would urge founders, what we actually did was to not give in to that type of urge, let's say, and reduce the amount of the contract if it goes to that, to avoid any type of like hardcore exclusivity or exclusive licensing to a single customer. So I think that's a big piece of potential like negative ripple effects in an acquisition later on.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so CNH Industrial became an investor in Augmenta about a year before the acquisition. So was this a strategic decision on your part to include them to your cap table? And are there again any contract terms in terms of investment agreement that one should be careful of, or in general, this arises some type of conflicts of interest? So how do you navigate through those conflicts?
Yeah. So that was what I was referring before. We didn't capitalize until after 2 years. I was referring to the round that we first raised by or with CNH Industrial. Indeed, they came in our Series A. They also took a board seat, and it was a strategic decision on our side because agriculture is one of the most segmented, let's say, markets that you can find in the world. So even though we were doing that at a low scale at the time, we were just going to random countries in Europe and the US, and we were finding some like customers. To scale that by yourself as a small startup is almost impossible. So it's we want the partner that has that type of global supply chain of product offerings and networks, right? So that was the reason why we want to bring them in our Series A. But in my opinion, and thinking a little bit beyond and aside, besides the ag sector, I think the healthiest thing for founders is to bring in strategic investors in the Series B or later. So not earlier than the Series B, as we did in Series A. So I would say Series B and later is much better. I would say that if you can bring a couple of strategics at the same time, is ideal, and not just one. Especially if that one is like a very clear acquisitor, potential acquisitor rather. So that's what I would do in terms of like that's my advice, let's say, in terms of strategics. And then on the contracts slash legal side, I would say in general again that it's very similar actually to the commercial side that we talked about earlier. You want to avoid any type of hardcore exclusivity, right of first refusal type of term in the in the shareholder agreement, right? So you want to make sure that you as a founder will be able to raise money from competitors, or either direct or indirect, and even more importantly, that you will be able to get offers from other people, other companies rather, that are also indirect or direct competitors with the one that got in your cap table.
See, I know, for example, that you guys had a pretty clean agreement, investment agreement, but still, did you find, did you have issues when you engaged with other parties? Was it still that, an extra effort was needed on your side to be still speaking with other competitors or other people to keeping the doors open?
Yeah, that's a very nuanced question, because the specifics, and I
Yeah.
think it's great for the audience here to also hear about that. But we were super lucky, actually, with the CNH team, M&A team at the time. We indeed did a very, very clean agreement in our Series A, but that doesn't mean that everybody else knew about it. So what I've witnessed myself the hard way is that even if you did all the things right on the legal side, all the other competitors, direct or indirect, with a strategic, feel and think that you have some kind of exclusive right with them, right? So they won't even pick up the phone, or they will treat you very, very differently in any kind of approach, either investment wise or more wise. And I've heard that, like, I had a case. I can't be very, very specific here, but I had a case where a direct competitor of our eventual acquisitor told me, like, 2 years after our original, like, touch base, they told me that they always felt that we had some kind of exclusive relationship with CNH, and that's why they didn't kind of push forward with our relationship. So that's extremely dangerous. So I would urge, I guess, founders to, even if they have a strategic in their cap table, or board, I would urge the founders to, when they speak with other potential competitors with their strategic, to highlight the actual terms that they have, before they, like, elaborate on other stuff,
Yeah,
because I
so I
think
guess I would say sort of helps on the sales side, and opening the market, and the strategic side, it definitely helps, but there's some more brute force again needed on the keeping the door open for competition.
Yep.
Okay. And at which stage in Augmenta's journey did you actually start considering an acquisition? And was 100 million always your goal?
Yeah. Well, the honest answer here is that we weren't thinking about an acquisition up until, like, a week before we got the term sheet. And I think that played a big role in the negotiations as well, to be honest. But in general, what we wanted to do is to, like, do it ourselves, go the long way ourselves. Some people call it IPO, some other people, like, call it $1 billion in valuation. I don't like these labels, but the general point is that we wanted to do it ourselves, go do a huge Series B, and scale the business. So that was our plan until a very good offer came on the table compared to our metrics at the time. So yeah, that's when, like, a week before we got the terms, practically. Every discussion before that was, we were doing the discussion, but we weren't thinking about the actual acquisition, to be honest.
So you were always in discussions, I guess, even though you weren't, yeah. So
Exactly.
how did you manage these discussions with the buyers with regards to the acquisition price itself? And what advice do you have to give to founders? How can they achieve a good multiple?
Yeah. I mean, a huge part, thinking back in my case, and I'm sure it will be relevant in other cases as well, but relationship play a big role. And knowing the people that are taking these decisions is extremely, extremely important, especially in bigger organizations. So that's a huge part. And I think, as you said, I couldn't have said it better. You are always in discussion. So even if you don't speak about acquisitions or an acquisition, anytime that you speak with an M&A department, they will most probably tell you that they are interested about investing in your company, never about acquiring you. So there's always this dance from the super early stages, or at least it was with us from the super early stages. So you need to be very, very mindful of that, I think, when you speak to them. And other than that, I think I guess I'll give the same answer to the previous question. The most important part in any type of negotiation is to have alternatives. And in our case, I can't be extremely specific, but in general, there are two types of alternatives that can also happen in parallel. One is having the conviction, right? If you have a team, a core team of founders and key team members that want to push this to the end, I think that's a big bargaining chip. So if you can sit to the on the table or sit across somebody else and look them in the eye and say, I really don't care. I'll push myself, even if this deal is not done. I can do this and I'll drive that home. If you have that conviction, I think that's extremely important. And then the second aspect of negotiations is the obvious, which is having competing offers, right? So competing offers is massively important in driving higher valuations and in closing the deal in general.
Okay. Let's go post-integration. So it's been a year, and of all major shareholders, it's just the founders that stick around after the sale. What other angles should a founder be considering in M&A that can affect them post-integration?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things that come to mind here. One is a little bit obvious, which is the employment agreements. The employment agreements for the founders and key employees, that's how it's usually called, are very, very important. What are the terms? What is a good leaver? What is a bad leaver? These things are extremely, extremely important to kind of polish and highlight. We were extremely lucky in our case. And the other side at the time, now we're on the same side, but at the time, the other side was extremely, I would say, founder friendly. Things went quite smoothly there, but that's, I know from other founder friends that I have, that's not always the case. So employment agreements pre-acquisition are very important. And then I would say some kind of high level plan in writing of how post-integration will look like, branding details, growth in terms of what was previously the startup, what are the plans of the acquirer in terms of the growth of that group of people now. Are we growing the team? If yes, how much? These things are quite important. And as founders, again, I think we focus a lot on the other stuff, not this stuff. We focus a lot in closing the deal. Most probably, we focus a lot in the price, some other details of the deal, liabilities and things like that, right? So we're laser focused usually there, and we miss the post acquisition reality. And I think that's also important. We need to think about both when we are negotiating the closure of the deal. So yeah, those two things come to mind as a big categories of things founders should look at.
So this is a bit similar to the process of getting startup financing, so get fundraising. Similarly to fundraising, then in M&A, as the steps progress, from the term sheet to the deal sheet to then long-form docs, and then actually signing those, the founder often thinks that they're, gaining in leverage, but their leverage is actually decreasing. So it's better, you're saying, to negotiate everything up front.
Yes.
That's when you have the most power in your hands. Okay. Okay, what other advice, a piece of advice do you have for founders who are listening to us today?
Yeah, I mean, we are in the tech finance network, so I would say having a team, uh, like a supporting team to the founder that is negotiating that deal is extremely important. Having a finance professional in the team, like helping with the let's say how can I call it, like things like cap tables or things like structured P&Ls that maybe we didn't have before at a startup, but a public company will need some adjustment on the previously kept Excel files or usually lean processes that startups have. Most probably, public companies would require something a little bit more elaborate when you do negotiations and on the SPA level. So I think having a supporting team is extremely important, both on the finance side and on the legal side, obviously. So I think doing that also early on, or thinking about that, I guess, a little bit earlier than you get the term sheet. I think that's also very, very wise, instead of just scrambling to figure it out like after you get the term sheet, and usually that doesn't work very well.
CFOs should be able to think ahead and be prepared. Okay.
Yes.
And what
Yep.
advice would you give to founders who are listening to us today?
Huh. Yeah. In general, I don't like the word advice, I guess, but I think you actually said it, Talia. The only thing that I can I can say here is to not think about scale early on, to persevere, like push brute force your way into the market. I think the first couple of years are extremely important, specifically the go-to-market strategy and the first product that is being shipped, um, on the technical side, and then on the business side, on the go-to-market, are extremely important. And a founder should do whatever it takes to figure it out early on in the first couple of years, even if it doesn't sound scalable. And if they do that and it doesn't work, that's perfect. Not perfect, but that's also good, because we figure it out early on, and we don't linger and spend VC money and our own money and time for like 10 years without like any end result. So I think spending time and the first money we get from institutional investors, focusing on go to market and the first prototype, are the most important aspects, and even if it doesn't look great.
Okay. So now I have a few questions from our audience. One is, and I guess it's because investors ourselves, we budget them a lot about paid pilots. So one question is, do you think it's really important that a customer, pays for it? In the B2B in general space, it's very common that you do a pilot first and then you do a proper deal. So in the pilot stage, how important do you think it is that the client actually pays something, that it is a paid pilot? And does the price matter, if it's a big fraction or a small fraction of the end price? And should founders be wasting time trying to get a paid pilot instead of just a pilot? What is your thought on this? I actually don't know. We've never discussed it.
Yeah. So I think there are phases to this, and I think the founders should be intellectually honest with the maturity of their product. So in our case, maybe you remember it, maybe you don't, but in our case, when we first started, we didn't care at all about the paid part, because we didn't feel that the product in 2020, early years of 2021, we didn't feel it was ready enough for somebody to pay us, right? So I think in the very early stages, we need to be much more flexible, let's say. And I'll go back to my previous answer to the advice question. I think going to the market and bringing the product to the customer's hands is priority number one. If that means that you don't get paid for like 6 months, that's fine in my book, because you get feedback. But I'll also say the other side of that coin. The second that the founder believes that the product is in a state that is in an actual MVP, I do believe that getting something out of it is extremely important, because when you are not getting paid anything for a long amount of time, it's very easy for the customer to just sell it somewhere. They're not gonna pick up the phone. They don't have any skin in the game. So I would say super early on, don't obsess a lot about paying the payment part. But when you are like at the end of your seed, let's say, I would say that you should start having conversations about price, because price is also a big part of go to market, right? Maybe it's cool, but maybe it's not cool enough for somebody to pay for it. So you need to figure that out, of course, before you raise some Series A and bigger rounds. Yeah.
I am one of those that always push founders to just get it a paid pilot or no pilot at all, because I don't know. I think buyers have an incentive for this type of innovation, but I get what you're saying. And sometimes time is a very big asset as well. So yeah, it's great to get the founders' take on that. And okay, here's another one that just came in on the team composition. But it's an interesting question. I mean, I guess every founder will have a different answer for this question. And so it's interesting to see in the founding team how the roles were separated. First of all, did you have a non-technical co-founder? And then as a follow-up, how did you divide responsibilities between product, between sales, and how a founder has many things in his head, so how do you manage this within a team, from a team perspective? Do you think that a technical founder needs a non-technical co-founder?
Well, that was not our case. Both both actual founders, and then the two more members that joined briefly after, which we still call founders. All four of us were all technical, but we split responsibilities very early on. So I specifically got more the fundraising, team building kind of role, and then Jim super early on was building the hardware, and then he transitioned towards the sales role. But to be absolutely honest, I mean, in the first 3 years, everybody was doing everything, right? I mean, even the most technical person in the team was traveling to trade shows and was meeting customers and was, most probably we weren't perfect at it, as Jim was and still is, because Jim is still in sales. But even though we weren't as good as Jim at the time, I'm using that example. In sales, we had to do it because that's the reality of the startup world. So I would say I wasn't obsessing so much about roles in the beginning. I guess we took a hard look at the team. We said who is doing what best, and that's how we split the roles in the beginning. And I guess that was it. Not more than that. I don't think. And to answer directly the second part of your question, I don't think that a technical founder needs a non-technical co-founder. But I at the same time, I don't think that's a bad idea, right? So don't get my answer wrong. I think both can work as long as they have this evolution type of mentality in their DNA.
As long as, I would say, as long as it's organic,
Yeah.
both
Yes.
can work.
Yep.
And because I also know the team composition from the very early days, I would say that it's exactly what you said in the beginning about evolution. So for example, George was highly technical when I met him, but today he pretty much knows everything I know about M&A and fundraisings and stuff like that. So he got a very big business background in this process. So I wouldn't say that you absolutely need it either. Okay. Another question for the very, very early days. how hard was it to find your first customer, and how did you convince them to purchase or to try your prototype? Because also, I mean, with your particular product, they could also get a lot of damages, right? It wasn't about just paying.
Yeah, we are dealing with a very high risk, high reward type of product. If we mess up, practically you can mess the entire field, which depending on the size of your field, it can be hundreds to millions of dollars in damages. So yes, it was extremely important, extremely risk heavy. I mean, convincing the first customers is always tough in regardless of the industry. In our case, I think our passion for this industry, because we didn't go in this industry because it was a huge market. We grew up in and around farms, so I think passion played a huge role, like speaking the farmer language per se, convincing them like that, and of course using very, I would say, not ingenious but smart ways to be flexible about how we deploy. For example, I'll give you our example, but I think everybody here that is a founder or aspiring founder can translate that to their own idea. You know, if you have a farm that is 1,000 acres, and you are not convinced about Augmenta, what we were telling to that farmer is that, go to the first year and just do Augmenta in 50 acres, not 1,000 acres, right? Just use us in a small piece that you feel comfortable with. We are super confident that this will work, and the next year we're gonna do 1,000, right? So, and by the way, if you do that, we are willing to, put our money where our mouth is, and tell you that you can pay after the season is over for these first 50 acres. So we were so confident or we were appearing confident about the results of our system. So that's how we penetrated the market. We got a bunch of smaller type of customers in the beginning, like that. Now, the bigger type of customers, like CNH, for example, are much tougher. They take much longer. The cycle is, just to give you some numbers, the sales cycle for a smaller customer that was around $250,000 to $300,000 was like 3 months, and for bigger types of customers that would be multi-million-dollar deals, it was like 6 months to a year. So, and closer to a year than 6 months, I would say. So it's super tough to convince to become your first customer or one of your first customers.
Okay, let's go back to the acquisition. I have a very specific question from someone that looks like is already in a process. So the question is, does the founder, after an exit of the company, walk away with the whole amount of capital in his name, or is there like a holdback or an escrow usually? And does he have to work for the new company, or can he walk away?
I mean, it's very rare in the deep tech world, let's say, to walk away with any type of like big bag and ride on the sunset, or live in an island somewhere. I actually do believe that even founders don't want to do that, to be honest, most of the founders. But yeah, it's very rare. I've seen that happening in very, very traditional businesses, but not in the startup world. So usually what you see is any type of there are like many varieties of vesting, but I think the mean is like 3 years of vesting of some piece of the stock, sitting in an escrow somewhere, and you get those funds like year over year practically, and they vest usually quarterly or bi-yearly. So that's how it usually gets done. And as a matter of fact, most probably the acquirer will not just want the founders, but also key employees that are a big part. If you are like a small startup of like 40 people, 50 people, most probably key employees will be like half of them. So it's that's how it usually looks like.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either. How do you communicate internally when the company is entering in a DD phase? So if the deal doesn't go through, you have not set expectations for your team. How do you manage that?
Oh
How
man,
did you actually do it?
I think um, I'm the worst person to answer the question because I was very aggressive with this, but most probably the I saw a couple of team members in the chat here. They will be laughing, but on their inside. But what I did was I didn't communicate anything until like the absolute last minute that I legally had to actually talk to people about this. So that helped me personally. I think maybe I'm a little bit unique case or a little bit corner case, let's say, on this one, but I think that's helpful in general for founders to not have the extra pressure of the team. The team means in my and I guess in every startup case, it's two things. Team is both the actual like founders and employees, and team is also the board, right? So you can have two types of pressures here, right? One is from the board for usually financial reasons, and the other is from team members, which is maybe a team member got tired, they are burning out, and they just want to sell, right? So if you have that type of pressure internally, any type of pressure internally, I think that's super bad for the founder that is negotiating. So what I did personally was that I didn't communicate any of it. I just told the team the last couple of offers that we got, and that, guys, it's real. It's real now. It's real. Let's focus on it now, and let's spend some time, some good like couple of months to do the SPA and all the DD work that is required to close this. So yeah, that's how. So like stalling out communication as much as you can, and then when you actually have to communicate, you only communicate with the people that are founders and key employees and the board, obviously, but not to the broader team. You don't want people to freak out and leave because mostly if they leave for bad reasons. They think that something was going to happen, and that's usually not the case. So yeah, delay communication as much as possible.
Okay,
And
confidentiality, Chinese walls. Okay.
yeah,
Post acquisition, again, how do you promote the buyer's culture, which is, I mean, in your case, it's a very, traditional industrial compared to a very archetypical startup, as we said. So how do you promote the buyer's culture or maintain parts of your culture with the existing team? How do you navigate that?
yeah. I mean, CNH, it's called CNH Industrial, and it's an industrial company. Indeed, it's an old company, but they actually are extremely forward-looking. At least that's my experience to date, and that was also my experience in the startup days through my connection with the M&A department. So they are very witty. They're very quick, and recently they've also spent billions in enriching their tech stack. So I think my life is actually a little bit easier than somebody on the outside would think. There is a strong drive internally to showcase our work because we are a tech company, and sometimes it's even hard to communicate that due to the history that we have around iron building iron-based vehicles. Now we are building autonomous vehicles, and the transition is a little bit hard sometimes, but we are building autonomous vehicles. And internally, from my perspective, being in the engineering world now, it's actually a little bit easier than you might think. So I guess to answer directly your question, and hopefully the team will agree, but not a lot of things have changed in how we approach work. So we are approaching work, even if we are a part of a 60,000, 50,000 people like organization, we are approaching work as a startup still. And at least I hope that that's not going to change as long as we are part of the company. So we are pushing as much and as hard as before, and I think organically other people around us are seeing that, and they are adjusting their way of looking at things. So that's the best answer I have. I know it's vague, but that's what we do to drive culture internally.
So it's once more brute force. So you're imposing the startup culture onto the big industrial.
Yeah.
And one final question. Yeah, I guess, large corporations, value that a lot. That's why they acquire startups after all. So if you have the strategy to go about it, I guess it's a good one. And one final question from the audience we will take. Is there anything that you would have done differently looking back at this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I hate answering that question because I mean, there are a million things that I would change looking back, but going back to the original, let's say, statement, I think that it's wrong to even like go there mentally, because you might change something with your current knowledge, but then something else will change in the journey back in the day, right? So I actually don't think I would change anything in our journey. I think we're extraordinarily lucky, and I'm extraordinarily lucky to have an extremely strong team that is the core team is here for practically 7 years now, and they are still here after an acquisition with a big industrial company. So I feel extremely lucky, and I wouldn't change I guess a thing in our journey. Yeah.
This question actually it came from one of your teammates, so
Right.
yeah, it's a good answer. Okay. Okay, so thanks everyone for being here with us today, and thank you, George, for what was a wonderful conversation. I very much enjoyed it. And you can stay tuned with our LinkedIn group we'll be posting a video of this discussion, as well as the future events on the M&A series with advisors and corporate development professionals.